Hey everyone, Mr. Ambrose here today with your daily dose of sonnets. This evening we'll be discussing sonnet lucky number 13. As usual, we'll read through the sonnet, I'll offer a little bit of analysis and commentary, and then give you an assignment to work on for homework tonight. So here we go, sonnet number 13. Oh, that you were yourself, but love, you are no longer yours than you yourself here live. Against this coming end you should prepare, and your sweet semblance to some other give, so should that beauty which you hold in lease find no determination, then you are yourself again after yourselves to cease. When your sweet issue your sweet form should bear, who lets so fair a house fall to decay, which husbandry and honor might uphold against the stormy gusts of winter's day, and barren rage of death's eternal cold? Ho, none but unthrifts. Dear my love, you know you had a father. Let your son say so. All right. So as we know, we are still in the series known as the Procreation Sonnet series. The first 17 of Shakespeare's 154 sonnets are procreation sonnets. Shakespeare is encouraging the fair youth to go out and have children. And we've seen him shift in tone a little bit in the recent sonnets. He's become a little bit more aggressive. In this particular sonnet, Shakespeare begins with almost a paradoxical observation. He says, "Oh, that you were yourself," meaning, "Oh, if only you were yourself." And this is a little bit of a paradox because, well, he is himself. The fair youth is himself. How could he be someone else? You are yourself. What else is there to be? So Shakespeare kind of grabs our attention with that hook in line one, and we as readers, fair youth as an audience, might be wondering a little bit about this paradox. But quickly there's a shift, and Shakespeare signifies that shift by saying, but love, you are no longer yours than you yourself here live. Essentially what that means is you're yourself now, but when you die, you will no longer be yourself. So, okay, now the paradox makes sense a little bit more. And Shakespeare continues in the poem to suggest that against this end you should prepare. You should prepare yourself for your coming end. And the way he suggests the fair youth prepare is by having children. One of the interesting elements of this particular sonnet is that there's a lot of tension between some really beautiful diction, words like sweet semblance and beauty and sweet issue and sweet form. All these really positive connotation words are kind of at odds with a lot of negative connotation words, a lot of negative imagery, such as, for instance, decease and decay. So in this poem, there's a fair amount of tension between the beauty of life in its current state and also the fact that that beauty is going to die out. And this tension serves to reinforce one of Shakespeare's most common themes in the sonnet series, which is that of mortality, the fact that one day this beauty is going to die, one day our lives are going to end. So what are we going to do to sort of stave that off? And as we've established thus far in the first 13 sonnets, the best way Shakespeare suggests staving that off is to have children. After Shakespeare sets this up in the opening two quatrains, in the third quatrain, he brings in a new metaphor to try to convince the fair youth to have children, and that metaphor is one of a household. He's looking at the fair youth and observing the fair youth as a beautiful young man, and he likens that young man to a beautiful house. And he basically says, who lets so fair a house fall to decay, which husbandry and honor might uphold against the stormy gusts of a winter's day? So basically, who would let a beautiful house fall to decay? You wouldn't do that. You would instead maintain that beautiful house. And Shakespeare suggests a way to maintain the beauty of the fair youth is for the fair youth to have children, in much the way we can maintain a household for future generations by making sure it's well maintained against the stormy gusts of a winter's day. And again, as we've established, that winter's day is a metaphor that Shakespeare often uses for old age and death. In fact, in the poem, he uses the word husbandry, which is a really interesting pun, a double meaning word, because husbandry, he's suggesting the fair youth become a husband, and in extension, a husband who is a father who has children. But also, husbandry is a word that would have been used in Shakespeare's time and in our time to mean like the maintenance of an estate. So animal husbandry is breeding animals, right? Animal husbandry is maintaining the animals on your farm. So there's sort of like this double connotation that fits into that metaphor of the household, because we want to maintain the household, we want to maintain the fair youth's life. How do we do that? By having children, and we're using a similar word that we would use to breed animals on the farm. And certainly for Shakespeare's Elizabethan audience, that pun would most certainly resonate for sure. One of the interesting things about this poem to me is that Shakespeare has a shift in the way he addresses the fair youth. Up until this point in the first dozen sonnets, he's used thou, which to us as modern readers, I feel like often sounds like something that's very, very formal. But actually, if you've taken, say, a Spanish class, you know that tú is the informal way to say you, and usted is the formal way to say you. So actually, in Shakespeare's time, even though you, to us as modern listeners, modern readers, that sounds really informal, right? And thou sounds very formal. It's actually the reverse. And again, think of it like in Spanish. Tú is what you would use to refer to your friends in informal conversation, and usted is what you would use to refer to a superior in formal conversation. So throughout the first 12 sonnets, Shakespeare's used thou to refer to the fair youth, but here he shifted to a much more formal tone, and he's shifting now to call the fair youth you. And if he just did that once, I mean, maybe it's just an accident or a construction, or he's trying to use some sort of literary sound device, but it's present in nearly every single line. Line 1, you, yourself, you. Line 2, yours, you, yourself. Line 3, you. Line 4, your, and so on and so forth. So nearly every single line throughout the first two quatrains, first 8 lines of the poem, features as many as 3 or 4 mentions of the word you. So that's real deliberate on Shakespeare's part, a big shift to a much more formal tone. We'll talk a little bit more about that tone tomorrow and in subsequent sonnets, but what I'd like you to do tonight for homework is I'd like you to try to write your own poem where you establish a more formal tone toward your subject. It probably wouldn't work to use you as a modern writer, because we use you all the time for informal and formal language, so we don't have that same distinction as in Shakespeare's time. But try to think about some words that you use to sound a little bit more formal, maybe some words that you would use in more formal correspondence, like in a formal email, and maybe you can make a word bank of those words that you would use. Try to think about elevating your diction to something that's a little bit more formal, but at the same time, try to have an intimate message, because that's another one of the bits of tension that we notice in this poem too. It's a really, really intimate message that Shakespeare is offering, but in a very formal way. So I'd like to see if you could create some of that tension within your own writing as well, offering commentary on an intimate subject, but doing so using more formal diction. So give that a shot for tonight. I look forward to seeing what you come up with. And until next time, take care.